24-year-old Lilly Martinez had always believed that family gatherings were supposed to feel like warm hugs wrapped in laughter and the smell of grilled burgers. But as she stood in her brother's backyard that sweltering Saturday afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona, watching her sister-in-law, Jessica, arrange perfectly symmetrical potato salad portions on designer paper plates, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step on a landmine she didn't even know existed. What happened next would shatter her understanding of family, force her to confront truths about herself she'd been avoiding for years, and ultimately lead to a transformation that would ripple through every corner of her life in ways she never could have imagined.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Lilly had always been the different one in the Martinez family, though she'd never quite understood why that felt like such a burden. Growing up in their modest two-bedroom house in Tucson, she was the daughter who preferred sketching in her notebook to watching football with Dad, the one who'd rather spend her allowance on art supplies than clothes, the one who dreamed of opening her own graphic design studio instead of following a practical career path. Now, 3 years after graduating from Arizona State with a degree in visual communications, she was still working part-time at Coffee and Canvas, a local cafe that hosted painting nights, while freelancing logo designs for small businesses from her cramped studio apartment. Her income was unpredictable, her savings account laughably small, but she felt alive when she was creating. That had to count for something, didn't it? Her older brother, Marcus, had taken a different route entirely. At 28, he was already a successful real estate agent with a sprawling 4-bedroom house in one of Phoenix's newer developments, complete with a swimming pool, 3-car garage, and a wife who seemed to have stepped straight out of a home decor magazine. Jessica Chen Martinez was everything Lilly wasn't. Organized, financially secure, socially polished, and seemingly incapable of wearing anything that wasn't perfectly coordinated. The invitation to Marcus and Jessica's Memorial Day barbecue had arrived via a group text 3 weeks earlier, complete with Jessica's trademark efficiency. Family barbecue, Saturday, May 27th, 2 p.m. Please confirm attendance by Tuesday. Potluck style, all coordinate dishes to avoid duplicates. Lilly had stared at her phone for a full 5 minutes before responding. These family gatherings always felt like performance evaluations, where she somehow never quite met the criteria for success. But Marcus was her brother, and despite their differences, she loved him. So she'd typed back a simple, "I'll be there," and spent the following weeks anxiety shopping for the perfect dish to contribute, finally settling on her grandmother's tres leches cake recipe, the one thing she could make that nobody could criticize. The morning of the barbecue, Lilly stood in front of her tiny bathroom mirror, changing clothes for the 4th time. The sundress felt too casual, the blouse too formal, the vintage band t-shirt too much like herself. She finally settled on a simple navy blue top and dark jeans. Safe, unremarkable, designed to help her blend into the background. Her studio apartment felt smaller than usual as she carefully packaged the tres leches cake, double-checking that the plastic wrap was smooth and the container was spotless. Through her single window, she could see her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, watering her garden, the elderly woman's movements slow but purposeful. Mrs. Patterson had been the first person to welcome Lilly to the building when she'd moved in 2 years ago, showing up with homemade cookies and genuine interest in Lilly's artwork. In many ways, the 73-year-old widow had become more like family to Lilly than her actual relatives. The drive to Marcus and Jessica's house took 45 minutes through Phoenix traffic, giving Lilly plenty of time to rehearse responses to the questions she knew were coming. "How's work going?" "Great. Really busy with new clients." "Are you dating anyone?" "Not right now. I'm focused on my career." "When are you going to get a real job?" This one she never had a good answer for. Marcus and Jessica's neighborhood always made Lilly feel like she was entering a different world. The houses were enormous, the lawns perfectly manicured, the driveways filled with luxury SUVs and sedans. Every mailbox matched, every garden was professionally maintained, every sidewalk looked like it had been pressure washed that morning.
She pulled her 10-year-old Honda Civic up to the curb, suddenly self-conscious about the small dent on the passenger side and the faded bumper sticker from her college radio station. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the cake and walked up the perfectly paved pathway to the front door, where she could already hear the sounds of conversation and laughter drifting from the backyard. Marcus answered the door before she could knock, his face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Lilly, there's my favorite sister." "I'm your only sister, Marcus," she replied, falling into the familiar routine of their childhood banter. "Details," he grinned, pulling her into a hug that smelled like cologne and barbecue smoke. "Come on, everyone's out back. Jessica has been asking about you."
The backyard was a masterpiece of suburban entertainment. String lights hung between perfectly trimmed trees, a large wooden deck hosted several seating areas with matching outdoor furniture, and the smell of grilled meat mingled with the scent of jasmine from Jessica's meticulously planned garden. About 20 people were scattered around the space: Marcus's coworkers, Jessica's book club friends, their neighbors, and a few family members Lilly recognized. Jessica appeared almost instantly, as if she'd been watching for Lily's arrival. She looked effortlessly elegant in a white linen dress that somehow showed no signs of food prep or hosting stress, her black hair pulled back in a perfect low bun. "Lilly, so glad you could make it," Jessica said, leaning in for an air kiss that didn't quite make contact. "What did you bring?" "Abuela's tres leches cake," Lilly replied, holding out the container. Jessica's smile flickered for just a moment, so briefly that Lilly almost missed it. "Oh, how traditional. I'll just put this with the other desserts." She took the container with the same careful handling she might use for something slightly contaminated. The next hour passed in the usual pattern of family gatherings. Lilly made polite conversation with Marcus's real estate colleagues about the housing market, listened to Jessica's book club discuss their latest selection, which Lilly hadn't read, and helped herself to perfectly grilled chicken and artisanal sides that probably cost more than Lily's weekly grocery budget. She was actually starting to relax, thinking that maybe this gathering would be different, when she found herself alone by the dessert table with Jessica. The other woman was rearranging the display, moving Lily's tres leches cake to a less prominent position behind a towering chocolate trifle and what appeared to be professionally made macarones. "You know, Lilly," Jessica said without looking up from her arranging, "I've been thinking about our conversation at Christmas." Lily's stomach dropped. She had no memory of any significant conversation with Jessica at Christmas, but Jessica's tone suggested this was important. "I'm not sure I remember." "About your lifestyle, your career choices, living situation, that sort of thing." The backyard suddenly felt smaller, the conversations around them fading into background noise. Lilly could feel her face getting warm, that familiar sensation that preceded either fight or flight. "I'm not sure what you mean," Lilly said carefully. Jessica glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard, then stepped closer. "Look, I care about Marcus, and by extension, I care about his family. But I think you need to understand something." "Here it comes," Lilly thought, her hands clenching involuntarily. "You make everyone uncomfortable. The way you dress, the way you talk about your art career like it's a real job, showing up to family events in that old car, it reflects on Marcus, on all of us." Lilly felt like someone had knocked the wind out of her. The perfect backyard, the perfect people, the perfect party. Suddenly it all felt like a stage set designed to highlight everything she wasn't. She started, but Jessica wasn't finished. You know, Lilly, I've been thinking about our conversation at Christmas. About your lifestyle, your career choices, living situation, that sort of thing. It's very uncomfortable for everyone. The way you dress, the way you talk about your art career like it's a real job, showing up to family events in that old car, it reflects on Marcus, on all of us. I know you probably don't mean to, but people notice these things. Marcus's clients, my friends. They see you and they make assumptions about our family, about our values. Maybe it would be better if you, found your footing a bit more before joining family gatherings, just until you've
figure things out." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from the grill. Toxic and choking. Lilly stood frozen, her mind racing between rage and humiliation, between wanting to scream and wanting to disappear entirely. Around them, the party continued. Marcus was laughing with his coworkers by the pool, children were playing on the perfectly maintained lawn, and the sun was setting behind the perfectly trimmed hedges. It was a beautiful scene, a picture of suburban success and family togetherness, and Lilly had never felt more alone in her life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The drive home from Marcus and Jessica's house was a blur of Phoenix streetlights and suppressed tears. Lily's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and she couldn't seem to get Jessica's words out of her head. "You make everyone uncomfortable." The phrase played on repeat like a broken record, each repetition feeling like another small cut. She'd left the party without saying goodbye properly, mumbling something to Marcus about not feeling well, which wasn't technically a lie. Her stomach was churning, her chest felt tight, and every breath seemed to require conscious effort. She'd managed to retrieve her tres leches cake container, now empty except for a few crumbs, evidence that at least someone had enjoyed her contribution, even if Jessica had dismissed it. By the time Lilly pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex, the sun had completely set, and the automatic lights were flickering on throughout the building. She sat in her car for several minutes, staring up at her second-floor window, dreading the thought of being alone with her thoughts in that small space. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hey, Jess said you weren't feeling great. Hope you're okay. Thanks for coming today." The kindness in the message somehow made everything worse. Marcus had no idea what his wife had said, no clue that his sister had been systematically torn down at his own party. Should she tell him? Would he even believe her? Jessica had been so careful, so quiet, so seemingly concerned. It would be her word against that of Marcus's perfect wife. Lilly finally forced herself out of the car and trudged up the exterior stairs to her apartment, her feet feeling like lead weights. As she fumbled with her keys, she heard a gentle voice behind her. "Lilly, dear, are you all right?" She turned to see Mrs. Eleanor Patterson standing in her doorway across the hall, wearing a floral housecoat and fuzzy slippers, her silver hair in curlers. The elderly woman's face was creased with genuine concern, and something about her grandmother-like warmth broke the dam Lilly had been building all evening. "Oh, Mrs. Patterson, Lily's voice cracked, and suddenly tears were streaming down her face. Without hesitation, Eleanor stepped forward and gently took Lily's arm. "Come on, honey. Let's get you inside and make some tea." 20 minutes later, Lilly found herself curled up on Eleanor's floral print sofa, wrapped in a hand-knitted afghan that smelled like lavender and vanilla. The older woman's apartment was the complete opposite of Jessica's sterile perfection. Every surface was covered with family photos, ceramic figurines, and well-loved books. It was cluttered but warm, lived in but loved. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs and a plate of homemade oatmeal cookies. She settled into her recliner with a small grunt and studied Lily's tear-stained face. "Now then," Eleanor's voice carried the authority of someone who had raised 4 children and buried a husband. "What happened?" The whole story came pouring out. Jessica's comments, the humiliation, the feeling of never being good enough for her own family. Eleanor listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of sympathy. When Lilly finished, the apartment was quiet except for the gentle ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. "That woman," Eleanor finally said, shaking her head, "sounds like she has the emotional intelligence of a brick wall." Despite everything, Lilly found herself laughing, a short, surprised sound that felt good after hours of holding back tears. "But here's what I don't understand," Eleanor continued, leaning forward in her chair. "Why do you care so much what she thinks?" "Because she's family," Lilly said automatically. "No, dear. She married into your family. There's a difference." Eleanor picked up one of her cookies and took a thoughtful bite. "I've been watching you for 2 years, Lilly. You're kind, you're talented, you work hard, and you bring beauty into the world with your art. Those are admirable qualities. But she's right, Lily said miserably. I don't have a real career. I can barely afford my rent. I don't fit in anywhere. According to whose definition? Eleanor interrupted sharply. Success isn't measured by the size of your house or the newness of your car, child. I should know. I've had both. And I've had neither. Lily looked up, curious, despite her misery. Eleanor settled back in her chair, her eyes taking on a distant quality. When I was your age, I was married to a man who made good money as a banker. We had a beautiful house in Scottsdale, new cars, all the right clothes. I thought I had everything figured out.
What happened? Life happened. Harold had a heart attack when he was 45. Suddenly, all that financial security didn't matter much when I was sitting in a hospital waiting room wondering if the love of my life was going to survive. Eleanor's voice softened. He did survive, thankfully, but it changed everything. We realized we'd been so focused on looking successful that we'd forgotten to actually live. She gestured around her small apartment. This place has one bedroom and a kitchen the size of a closet, but it's been the happiest home I've ever had. Harold and I had 15 more wonderful years here before he passed, and every single day was richer than all those years we spent trying to impress people we didn't even like. Lily absorbed this information, feeling something shift slightly in her chest. But how do you deal with people who judge you, who think you're not enough? Eleanor chuckled. Oh, honey, there will always be Jessica Chen Martinez's in the world. People so insecure about their own choices that they need to tear down anyone who dares to live differently. She reached over and patted Lily's hand. The question is, are you going to let them dictate how you see yourself? I don't know how not to, Lily admitted. Well, that's something we can work on. Eleanor stood up with surprising energy. But first, I want to show you something. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a large photo album bound in cracking leather. She sat back down and opened it to the first page, revealing black and white photographs from what appeared to be the 1940s. This, Eleanor said, pointing to a young woman in overalls standing next to an airplane, was me at 22. Lily's eyes widened. The woman in the photo had Eleanor's smile but looked completely different from the grandmotherly figure sitting beside her. She was holding a wrench and had grease on her face, standing confidently next to what appeared to be a military aircraft. You worked on planes? I was a mechanic for the Women Air Force service pilots during World War II, Eleanor said proudly. Back then, they told us women couldn't do mechanical work, that our delicate hands weren't suited for such masculine tasks. She laughed. I could strip and rebuild an engine faster than most of the men in my unit. She turned the page, revealing more photos of Eleanor in various work situations, fixing engines, standing with groups of other women in uniform, smiling confidently at the camera in every shot. But after the war, Eleanor continued, society expected us all to go back home, get married, and pretend we'd never been capable of anything more than cooking and cleaning. A lot of women did exactly that. But not you? Not immediately. I kept working as a mechanic for 3 more years, until I met Harold. And even then, I didn't give it up because someone told me to. I gave it up because I fell in love with him and wanted to build a life with him. Eleanor's finger traced one of the photos lovingly. The difference was choice, Lily. I made decisions based on what I wanted, not what other people expected of me. Lily stared at the photos, trying to reconcile this vibrant, confident young woman with the story she just heard about the perfect suburban life that followed. The point is, Eleanor said, closing the album gently, there's no single right way to live a life. Your sister-in-law has chosen her path, and it works for her. But that doesn't mean it has to work for you, or that your path is any less valid. So what do I do now? How do I face family gatherings knowing what she really thinks of me? How do I stop feeling like I'm failing at being an adult? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, studying Lily's face with the intensity of someone making an important decision. I have an idea, but it's going to require you to be braver than you've ever been before. What kind of idea?
Eleanor smiled, and for a moment, Lily could see the fearless young woman from the photographs shining through. How would you like to help me with a project? Something that might just change both of our lives and show you exactly what you're capable of when you stop apologizing for who you are. Lily felt something stir in her chest. Not quite hope, not quite excitement, but something that felt suspiciously like possibility. For the first time since Jessica's words had cut her down, she felt like maybe there was a way forward that didn't involve shrinking herself to fit other people's expectations. "Tell me more," she said.
The next morning, Lily woke up on Eleanor's couch with a crick in her neck and the faint smell of bacon drifting from the kitchen. Sunlight was streaming through the lace curtains, and she could hear the older woman humming an old tune while she cooked. For a moment, Lily felt disoriented. Then the events of the previous evening came rushing back. "Good morning, sunshine," Eleanor called from the kitchen. "I hope you like your eggs over easy." Lily stretched and folded the afghan, running her fingers through her disheveled hair. "Mrs. Patterson, I should probably go get ready for work." "It's Sunday, dear," Eleanor said, appearing in the doorway with a plate in each hand. "And it's Eleanor. I think after last night we've moved past formalities." They ate breakfast at Eleanor's small dining table, surrounded by photos of her late husband Harold and their travels together. Lily found herself studying the images: Eleanor and Harold hiking in the Grand Canyon, dancing at what looked like a 1960s wedding, standing proudly in front of various houses and apartments over the decades. "You two looked happy." "We were. Took us a while to figure out what happiness actually meant, but once we did," she smiled wistfully. "Now, about that project I mentioned." She disappeared into what appeared to be a spare bedroom and returned with a large cardboard box that looked like it had been stored away for years. Setting it on the table, she lifted the lid to reveal stacks of photographs, documents, and what appeared to be aircraft parts. "After Harold died 5 years ago, I started thinking about legacy," Eleanor said, carefully lifting out a photograph of herself working on an airplane engine. "All these stories, all these experiences, they're just going to disappear when I'm gone unless someone does something with them." Lily picked up one of the photos, examining the confident young woman in the mechanic's jumpsuit. "These are incredible, Eleanor. This history should be preserved." "Exactly." Eleanor's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "I've been wanting to create some kind of exhibition or documentary about the women Air Force service pilots. Most people have never heard of us, even though we flew every type of aircraft the military had, tested experimental planes, and freed up male pilots for combat duty." She pulled out a folder filled with official documents, letters, and newspaper clippings. There were over 1,000 women in the WASP program, but our service wasn't officially recognized by the military until 1977, more than 30 years later. Many of the women I served with have passed away, and their stories are disappearing. Lily felt a spark of interest. "What kind of exhibition were you thinking?" "That's where you come in," Eleanor said, settling back in her chair. "I've got the content. Photos, documents, personal stories from women I'm still in touch with. But I need someone with creative skills to help me figure out how to present it all. Someone who understands visual storytelling." "You want me to help design an exhibition?" "You want me to help me create something that matters," Eleanor corrected. "Something that honors these forgotten women and maybe inspires other young women to be brave enough to break barriers." Lily felt her heart racing. This was exactly the kind of project she'd dreamed of working on. Something with purpose. Something that used her skills to tell an important story. But the familiar voice of doubt came rushing back. "Eleanor, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I don't have experience with museum exhibitions. I mostly do logos and business cards. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not qualified enough?" "Stop." Eleanor held up her hand firmly. "Right there. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps you trapped.
She reached across the table and took Lily's hands. Do you think I was qualified to work on military aircraft when I started? Do you think any of those women were? We learned by doing, by being willing to try something that scared us. But this is important. These women deserve to have their story told by someone who cares, someone who will put their whole heart into it. That matters more than credentials. Eleanor's grip tightened. Besides, I've seen your artwork, remember? Those sketches you showed me of the desert landscapes, the portrait you drew of Mrs. Chen downstairs. You have real talent, Lily. Lily felt tears threatening again, but this time they felt different. Less like defeat, more like overwhelm at the possibility of being seen, truly seen, for who she could be, rather than who she wasn't. Where would we even start? She asked quietly. Eleanor grinned, and Lily caught another glimpse of that fearless young mechanic. Well, first, we need to do some research. There's a WASP reunion happening next month in Tucson. Some of the last surviving women will be there, including my old roommate, Betty Sullivan. She pulled out a faded letter from the box. Betty's 87 now, but sharp as a tack. She's been trying to get me to come to these reunions for years, but I always made excuses. Thought I was too old, too out of touch.
And now? Now, I think it's time to stop making excuses. Eleanor looked directly at Lily. Both of us. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Lily imagined herself walking into a room full of elderly women who had lived such extraordinary lives, trying to capture their stories, being responsible for preserving their legacy. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. Can't do what exactly? Eleanor asked. Drive to Tucson? Talk to some elderly ladies? Take some photographs? Be responsible for something this important? What if Jessica was right? What if I really don't have what it takes to... Lilly Marie Martinez. Eleanor's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect in a male-dominated field during wartime. If you mention that woman's opinion one more time, I'm going to drive over there and have a few choice words with her myself. Despite her anxiety, Lily found herself smiling. Here's what I learned during the war, Eleanor continued. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Every single one of those women was scared when they first climbed into a cockpit, but they did it anyway because it mattered. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline. I spent too many years after the war trying to fit into other people's definitions of what a woman should be. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't waste decades of your life apologizing for who you are. Lily stared down at the photographs spread across the table, each one showing women who had refused to accept limitations placed on them by society. Women who had taken on roles everyone said they couldn't handle and proved the doubters wrong. What would we need to do first? She heard herself asking. Eleanor turned back to her, eyes bright with excitement. First, we plan our trip to the reunion. Then we start interviewing the women, collecting their stories, photographing their artifacts. After that, she shrugged, we figure it out as we go. That's not much of a plan. Some of the best adventures start with terrible plans, Eleanor said with a laugh. Harold and I once decided to drive to Alaska with no map and $50. We ended up having the most amazing 3 weeks of our lives. Lily looked around Eleanor's apartment, at the photos of adventures, the evidence of a life fully lived, the proof that happiness could be found in unexpected places. Then she thought about her own small apartment, her part-time job, her careful, safe, small existence. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, what? Okay, let's do it. Let's go to the reunion and start collecting these stories. Her voice grew stronger with each word. Let's create something amazing. Eleanor clapped her hands together in delight. Oh, this is going to be wonderful. Betty is going to be so excited. And wait until you meet some of the other women. There's Martha Rodriguez, who flew experimental jets, and Alice Thompson, who is one of the few women trained to fly the B-26 Marauder. As Eleanor continued talking about the women they would meet, Lily felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Genuine excitement about the future.
For the first time since Jessica's cutting words, she wasn't thinking about what she lacked or how she didn't measure up. Instead, she was thinking about stories that needed to be told, about women's courage that deserved to be remembered, about using her skills for something that mattered. Her phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Hope you're feeling better today. Jess said to tell you she enjoyed talking with you yesterday." Lilly stared at the message, feeling the familiar stab of hurt and anger. But this time, it was followed by something new, a quiet determination. Jessica could think whatever she wanted about Lily's life choices. What mattered was what Lilly chose to do next. She deleted the message without responding and turned back to Eleanor, who was already pulling out a calendar to plan their trip to Tucson. "When do we leave?" Lilly asked. "How about next Friday? That gives us time to prepare, and the reunion starts Saturday morning." "Perfect." Lilly felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. "I'll request the time off from work." As they spent the rest of the morning planning their trip and going through more of Eleanor's photographs, Lilly realized that for the first time in her adult life, she was about to do something that felt completely, authentically her own choice. Not a reaction to other people's expectations, not an attempt to fit in or prove herself, but a genuine step towards something that excited and challenged her. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what she needed to do. The week leading up to the Tucson trip flew by in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Lilly threw herself into research, spending every free moment learning about the Women Air Force Service Pilots program, studying the aircraft they flew, and preparing interview questions. Her small apartment became command central, with printouts of historical documents taped to the walls and her laptop perpetually open to aviation history websites. At Coffee and Canvas, her coworkers noticed the change immediately. "You seem different," observed Maya, her fellow barista and fellow aspiring artist. "More focused. What's going on?" Lilly found herself actually excited to share the project, describing Eleanor's wartime service and their upcoming trip. Maya listened with growing enthusiasm, eventually pulling out her phone to show other customers some of the WASP photos Lilly had printed. "This is incredible," said David Chen, a regular customer who worked as a documentary filmmaker. "Have you thought about filming any of these interviews?" "Filming?" Lilly hadn't considered that possibility. "These women won't be around forever," David said seriously. "Audio and video would capture so much more than just written interviews. Their expressions, their gestures, the way their voices change when they talk about flying." He pulled out his business card. "I have a small camera setup I could lend you. Nothing fancy, but it would be perfect for intimate interviews." That evening, Lilly knocked on Eleanor's door, practically bouncing with excitement. "David from the coffee shop offered to lend us video equipment." Eleanor opened the door wider, revealing her living room had undergone its own transformation. Charts of aircraft specifications covered her coffee table, and she'd arranged her photographs chronologically along the sofa. "Video equipment, you say?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled. "How wonderfully modern. Betty would get such a kick out of being filmed. She always was a bit of a performer." They spent the evening learning how to operate David's camera, with Eleanor proving surprisingly adept at the technology. "I may be 73, she said, adjusting the focus with steady hands, "but I didn't get to my age by being afraid of new things." Friday morning arrived with unexpected drama. As Lilly was loading her supplies into her Honda Civic, her phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, Marcus, I can't really talk right now." "Lilly, where are you going?" "Jessica said she saw you loading suitcases into your car." Lilly felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Of course Jessica had been watching. "I'm going to Tucson for the weekend. It's a work project." "What kind of work project? And why didn't you tell me you were leaving town?" The question caught her off guard. When had Marcus started monitoring her travel plans? It's hard to explain. I'm helping Mrs. Patterson with something important." "Your elderly neighbor?" "Lilly, that doesn't sound like work. It sounds like..." "Like what?" she interrupted, surprising herself with the sharpness in her voice. There was a pause. "Like you're avoiding dealing with real responsibilities. Jessica mentioned she tried to have a helpful conversation with you at the barbecue about maybe focusing on stability instead of these artistic pursuits." The knot in her stomach twisted tighter. Jessica had told Marcus about our conversation at the barbecue, but her version of events was very different from reality. Marcus, I need to go. I'll call you when I get back. Lily, wait! She hung up and stood in the parking lot, hands shaking with anger and hurt. Eleanor appeared beside her, carrying her own small suitcase. Family troubles? Eleanor asked gently. Jessica told Marcus about our conversation at the barbecue, but she made it sound like she was just trying to help me. Now he thinks I'm being irresponsible by going on this trip. Eleanor set down her suitcase and placed a firm hand on Lily's shoulder. Listen to me very carefully. What we're doing this weekend, preserving the stories of brave women who changed history, that's not irresponsible. That's exactly what responsible people do. But what if Arcus is right? What if I should be focusing on getting a better job instead of— Should, Eleanor interrupted, the most dangerous word in the English language. Here's what I know about should. It killed more dreams than fear ever did.
She gestured toward Lily's car. Now, are we going to let other people's opinions keep us from honoring these women's service, or are we going to show them what we're really made of? The drive to Tucson took them through some of Arizona's most beautiful desert landscape. As Phoenix's urban sprawl gave way to saguaro cacti and red rock formations, Lily felt her anxiety beginning to lift. Eleanor proved to be an entertaining travel companion, sharing stories about her wartime adventures and Harold's terrible sense of direction on their various road trips. One time, Eleanor said, laughing at the memory, Harold insisted he could navigate us from Phoenix to San Diego using only gas station maps. We ended up in a tiny town called Y, Arizona, which, as it turned out, was exactly what I was asking myself. They checked into a modest hotel near the reunion venue, a community center that had been decorated with vintage aviation posters and American flags. Eleanor immediately began introducing Lily to other attendees, women in their 80s and 90s who carried themselves with unmistakable dignity and quiet confidence. Betty Sullivan was exactly as Eleanor had described, sharp-eyed, quick-witted, and delighted to see her old roommate. She was a tiny woman with perfectly styled silver hair and a handshake that could crush walnuts. "Ellie!" Betty embraced Eleanor warmly before turning curious eyes to Lily. "And this must be the young artist you told me about." "Lilly Martinez," she introduced herself, suddenly feeling very young and inexperienced. "Martinez, you said? We had a wasp named Carmen Martinez from New Mexico. Any relation?" I don't think so. My family's from Arizona." "Well, doesn't matter. What matters is you're here to tell our stories." Betty's expression grew serious. "Most people have no idea what we did during the war. They think we were just pretty girls playing at being pilots." Over the next few hours, Lily met woman after woman with extraordinary stories. Martha Rodriguez, who had test-flown experimental aircraft that male pilots were afraid to touch. Alice Thompson, who had ferried B-26 bombers across the country despite the aircraft's notorious reputation for being difficult to handle. Dorothy Kim, whose parents had opposed her joining the WASPs because they thought flying was too dangerous for women. Each interview revealed new layers of complexity and courage. These women hadn't just broken barriers, they demolished them, often at great personal cost. I lost 2 boyfriends during my WASP service. One couldn't handle dating a woman who could fly better than he could. The other said I was unnatural for wanting to do a man's job. "How did you handle that?" Lily asked, fascinated despite her nervousness behind the camera. Dorothy smiled wryly. "I kept flying. Figured any man who couldn't appreciate what I was doing wasn't worth my time anyway." As the day progressed, Lily found herself relaxing into the role of interviewer and documentarian. The women were patient with her technical fumbles and generous with their time and stories. More importantly, they seemed genuinely excited that someone young was interested in preserving their history. "You know," said Alice Thompson during a break between interviews, "I wish I'd had someone like you around when I was your age. Someone who understood that there's more than one way to measure success." That evening, Eleanor and Lily sat in their hotel room reviewing the day's footage.
The interviews were better than Lilly had dared to hope. Intimate, powerful, filled with moments of laughter and revelation. "Look at this," Eleanor said, pausing the video on Dorothy's face as she described her first solo flight. "You can see exactly what it felt like for her. That's something no history book could capture." Lilly nodded, feeling a growing sense of accomplishment. "Eleanor, I think we might actually be creating something important here." "Might be," Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Honey, we absolutely are. And more than that, you're discovering what you're capable of when you stop apologizing for your ambitions." Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Called Coffee and Canvas. They said you took time off for a personal project. What's really going on?" For the first time, Lilly didn't feel the familiar stab of anxiety at his disapproval. Instead, she felt something that surprised her, a quiet confidence in her choices. She typed back, "I'm working on something meaningful. I'll tell you all about it when I get back." Then she turned off her phone and returned her attention to the extraordinary women whose stories she was privileged to preserve. Tomorrow would bring more interviews, more challenges, and undoubtedly more questions about her life choices. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of what she had already accomplished and the trust these remarkable women had placed in her, Lilly felt something she had never experienced before: absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be.
3 weeks after returning from Tucson, Lilly's world came crashing down in the most unexpected way possible. She had been riding high on the success of the WASP interviews, working late into the nights at her kitchen table, transcribing conversations, and organizing hundreds of photographs. The project had grown beyond anything she'd initially imagined. She now had over 12 hours of video interviews, dozens of never-before-seen photographs, and personal artifacts that Betty Sullivan had entrusted to her care. David, from Coffee and Canvas, had been so impressed with the footage that he'd introduced her to his friend Sarah Williams, a curator at the Phoenix Art Museum. Sarah had taken one look at Lilly's work and immediately expressed interest in hosting an exhibition. "This is exactly the kind of untold story our community needs to hear," Sarah had said during their meeting at the museum. "We could potentially schedule this for our main gallery space in 6 months, maybe tie it in with Veterans Day." For the first time in her life, Lilly felt like she was building something that mattered, something that was uniquely hers. She'd even started to believe that maybe Jessica's harsh words at the barbecue had been exactly the catalyst she needed to find her true purpose. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, and Lilly was at Coffee and Canvas, working the early shift while simultaneously editing interview footage on her laptop between customers. Her phone rang just as she finished serving a regular his usual espresso. "Lilly Martinez?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes, this is Lilly." "This is Dr. Patricia Hernandez from Banner University Medical Center. I'm calling about Eleanor Patterson. You're listed as her emergency contact." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Emergency contact? Is she okay? What happened?" Her downstairs neighbor found her collapsed in her apartment early this morning. She's suffered a severe stroke, and she's currently in intensive care. Lilly's legs gave out, and she sank onto the stool behind the counter. Maya, her coworker, immediately rushed over, concerned. Is she going to be okay?" Lilly managed to ask. There was a pause that lasted too long. "Her condition is very serious. The next 48 hours will be critical. Can you come in? She was asking for you when she briefly regained consciousness." Lilly was at the hospital within 20 minutes, still wearing her coffee-stained apron. The ICU was a maze of beeping machines and hushed conversations, and when she finally found Eleanor's room, her heart broke. The vibrant, spirited woman who had become her mentor and friend looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, connected to tubes and monitors. Her silver hair was matted, her face pale and slack on one side. "Eleanor?" Lilly whispered, taking her hand. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, and she seemed to recognize Lilly, though her speech was slurred and difficult to understand. The project," Eleanor struggled to form the words. "Don't worry about the project right now," Lilly said, tears streaming down her face. "Just focus on getting better."
but Eleanor gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Promise me. Finish it." "I promise, but you're going to be fine and we'll finish it together." Eleanor's expression suggested she knew better. Over the next 3 days, Lilly barely left the hospital. She called in sick to work, ignored her phone, and maintained a vigil beside Eleanor's bed. The doctors were cautiously optimistic but honest about the challenges ahead. Even if Eleanor survived, the stroke had caused significant damage. Her ability to speak clearly might never fully return, and her mobility would be severely limited. On Thursday afternoon, while Lilly was dozing in the uncomfortable hospital chair, her phone buzzed insistently. She saw Marcus's name and reluctantly answered. "Lilly, where the hell are you? I've been trying to reach you for 2 days." "I'm at the hospital. Eleanor had a stroke." "Your neighbor?" "Lilly, you can't just disappear because some old lady got sick. I got a call from your work saying you haven't shown up and Mom's been worried sick." The casual dismissal of Eleanor as some old lady hit Lilly like a physical blow. "Marcus, she's not just some old lady. She's my friend, and she's not family, Lilly. We are." His voice carried the same condescending tone she'd heard from Jessica at the barbecue. This is exactly what Jessica was talking about. You get caught up in these projects and you lose sight of what's actually important. "What's actually important?" Lilly repeated, her voice rising despite the hospital setting. "Your responsibilities, your job, your future. Not playing make-believe with some old woman's war stories." Something snapped inside Lilly. Make-believe? Eleanor served her country when most people thought women couldn't handle anything more complex than typing. She's one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And she's dying, Marcus. She's dying, and all you can think about is whether I'm inconveniencing you by caring about her? Don't be dramatic. I'm sure she'll be fine. But you need to get your priorities straight. Jessica and I have been talking, and we think... Lilly hung up on him.
She sat in the silence of the ICU, surrounded by the steady beeping of Eleanor's monitors, and felt more alone than she ever had in her life. The person who had believed in her most was unconscious and fighting for her life. Her own family saw her devotion as a character flaw, and suddenly the project that had felt so important just days ago seemed impossible to complete on her own. That evening, Sarah Williams called with what should have been wonderful news. "Lilly, I've been talking to the museum board, and they're very excited about the WASP exhibition. We'd like to move forward with the November opening. Can you have everything ready by then?" Lilly looked at Eleanor's still form and felt panic rising in her throat. "Sarah, there's been a complication. Eleanor's in the hospital, and I don't know if—" "Oh, no, I'm so sorry to hear that. But the exhibition can still happen, right? You have all the materials?" "Did she?" Lilly thought about the boxes of photographs still scattered around Eleanor's apartment, the interviews that needed to be edited, the historical context that needed to be researched and written. She thought about trying to do it all alone without Eleanor's guidance and expertise. I don't know if I can do it by myself," she admitted. There was a pause. "Well, maybe we should postpone then. Wait until your friend recovers." But what if Eleanor didn't recover? What if the woman who had entrusted Lilly with preserving these stories never got the chance to see them properly honored? After Sarah hung up, Lilly sat in the darkened hospital room and felt the weight of her promise to Eleanor pressing down on her chest. She'd sworn to finish the project, but how could she possibly do justice to these extraordinary women's stories when she was barely holding her own life together? Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "David asked me to check on you. He said if you need help with anything, just ask." Another buzz, this time from Betty Sullivan. "Eleanor told me about the exhibition. These stories need to be told, dear. Let me know how I can help." Then another, from Dorothy Kim. "Heard about Eleanor from Betty. Sending prayers. Don't let our stories die with us." Lilly stared at the messages, realizing that somewhere along the way, she'd built a network of people who believed in what she was doing. People who saw value in her work, who trusted her with something precious. But it still felt overwhelming. The technical aspects of mounting a museum exhibition, the writing, the design, the coordination with vendors and contractors, she'd never done anything on this scale before. What if she failed? What if she let everyone down?
She looked at Eleanor, whose breathing was steady but labored, and whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this without you." As if in response, Eleanor's fingers twitched slightly in her hand. It might have been involuntary, but Lilly chose to interpret it as encouragement. The next morning brought the hardest conversation of Lily's life. Dr. Hernandez pulled her aside with an update on Eleanor's condition. "We've done everything we can medically. Her vital signs have stabilized, but there's been significant brain damage. Even if she continues to recover, she'll need extensive rehabilitation and round-the-clock care for the foreseeable future." What does that mean, exactly? It means she'll likely need to be moved to a long-term care facility. Her apartment won't be suitable for her needs anymore. Lily felt the floor drop out from under her. What about her things? Her photographs, her documents? That would be up to her next of kin to decide. Do you know if she has any family? Lily shook her head, realizing with growing horror that Eleanor might not have anyone else in the world. "I need to make some calls," Lily said weakly. She spent the afternoon trying to reach anyone who might be Eleanor's family, calling numbers from Eleanor's address book and getting dead ends or distant relatives who barely remembered her. The reality was becoming clear. Lily might be the only person standing between Eleanor's lifetime of memories and the trash bin. As evening fell, she sat in the darkened hospital room and felt the most daunting challenge of her life. She had promised to finish the project, but now she also had to figure out how to preserve Eleanor's entire legacy, manage her care, and do it all while her own family thought she was wasting her time on something unimportant. The weight of it felt crushing. But as she sat there, holding Eleanor's hand and watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing, Lily realized that this moment would define who she really was. She could retreat back to her safe, small life and let these stories disappear. Or she could find a way to honor the trust that had been placed in her, even if it meant risking everything. The choice, terrifying as it was, felt surprisingly clear. The breakthrough came on a Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Eleanor's stroke, in the most unlikely place imaginable, the cluttered back office of Coffee and Canvas. Lily had finally returned to work, moving through her shift like a zombie. She'd spent the previous night in Eleanor's apartment trying to sort through decades of accumulated memories and feeling completely overwhelmed. Boxes of photographs covered every surface. Documents were scattered across the floor, and Eleanor's lifetime of experiences felt too precious and too fragile for Lily to handle alone. She was mechanically steaming milk for a latte when David Chen approached the counter with an expression of gentle concern. "Lily, Maya told me about Eleanor. I'm so sorry." "Thank you," she replied automatically, not looking up from the espresso machine. "Listen, I know this might not be the right time, but I watched some of the footage you shot in Tucson last night. All of it, actually." That got her attention. "All of it? David, there's 12 hours. "I know. I couldn't stop watching." His eyes were bright with excitement that seemed inappropriate given the circumstances. "Lily, do you have any idea what you've captured here? These women's stories, the way you interviewed them, the intimacy you created. It's extraordinary." She felt tears threatening again. "It doesn't matter now. Eleanor was the one who understood the historical significance, who knew how to put it all together. I was just the person holding the camera." "That's not true, and you know it," David leaned across the counter. "Those women weren't opening up to Eleanor through the camera. They were opening up to you. There's something about the way you listen, the questions you ask. You made them feel safe to share their deepest memories." She shook her head. "David, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't finish this project alone. The museum wants a full exhibition, and I don't even know where to start with." "What if you weren't alone?" The question stopped her mid-sentence. "What do you mean?" David pulled out his phone and showed her a screen filled with text messages. "After Maya told me what was happening, I reached out to some people. Documentary filmmakers I know, museum professionals, historians. I sent samples of your interviews." "You did what?" Lily felt a flush of panic. "David, I didn't give you permission." "I know, and I'm sorry, but listen to me." He scrolled through the messages. "Professor Amanda Roberts from ASU's history department wants to help with research. Jennifer Walsh from the Arizona Historical Society has access to archives you'd never find on your own. And Tom Sullivan, he's a grant writer, thinks this project could qualify for several funding opportunities. Lilly stared at the phone, seeing email after email from people she'd never heard of, all expressing enthusiasm for Eleanor's project. I don't understand. Why would strangers want to help? Because what you're doing matters, said Maya, who had been listening from behind the pastry case. Because these stories deserve to be told, and you're the person those women trusted to tell them. Before Lilly could respond, her phone rang. Betty Sullivan's name appeared on the screen. Lilly, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. Dorothy Kim gave me your number. Of course not, Betty. How are you? I'm well, but more importantly, how are you? I heard about Eleanor from the girls, and we're all worried about you. Lilly felt that familiar tightness in her throat. I'm managing. But Betty, I don't think I can finish the exhibition project. It's too big, and without Eleanor... Don't you dare, Betty interrupted, her voice carrying the same authority Eleanor had displayed. Do you think Eleanor would want you to give up? No, but do you think we shared our stories with you so they could sit in boxes somewhere? No, but I don't know how. Then we'll teach you how. Betty's tone softened. Honey, we didn't survive test flights in experimental aircraft and navigate through thunderstorms just to let our stories die because one young woman is scared of making mistakes. But what if I mess it up? What if I don't do justice to what you all accomplished? There was a long pause, and when Betty spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. Lilly, do you know what the biggest tragedy would be? Not that you might make mistakes, but that these stories might never be told at all because you were too afraid to try.
That afternoon, Lilly found herself sitting in a conference room at Arizona State University, surrounded by 5 people she'd never met before who had somehow become invested in Eleanor's project. David had orchestrated the meeting, and to her amazement, everyone had showed up. Professor Amanda Roberts was a specialist in women's military history who had been searching for years for primary source material about the WASPs. Jennifer Walsh had access to the state's entire aviation archive. Tom Sullivan had already identified 3 potential grants that could fund the exhibition. Sarah Martinez was a graphic designer who volunteered her services for museum exhibitions, and Maria Lopez was a documentary editor who was between projects. Here's what I propose, Professor Roberts said, spreading papers across the conference table. We form a collaborative team. Each person contributes their expertise, but Lilly remains the creative director and primary author of the exhibition. I don't know if I'm qualified to be a creative director, Lilly protested. You interviewed these women for 12 hours and earned their complete trust, Jennifer pointed out. You understand their stories better than any of us ever could. That's the most important qualification there is. Tom Sullivan opened his laptop. I've been researching funding opportunities all morning. There's a National Endowment for the Arts grant for community history projects that's due next month. The American Association of Museums has funding for exhibitions featuring underrepresented voices, and the Veterans Administration has a new initiative supporting projects that honor women's military service. How much money are we talking about? Lilly asked, still struggling to believe this was really happening. Potentially enough to fund not just the Phoenix Art Museum exhibition, but a traveling version that could visit other cities, maybe even enough to produce a documentary film. Maria Lopez leaned forward. I've been thinking about the video footage David showed me. With some professional editing and additional interviews, this could be a powerful documentary. These women won't be with us forever. We have a responsibility to preserve their voices while we still can. Over the next 2 hours, the team outlined a comprehensive plan. Professor Roberts would handle historical research and fact-checking. Jennifer would provide archival materials and connect them with other museums. Tom would manage grant applications and budgets. Sarah would design the exhibition layout and materials. Maria would edit the documentary, and Lilly would oversee it all, conduct additional interviews, and serve as the primary storyteller. What about Eleanor? She should be credited as co-creator. Absolutely, Professor Roberts agreed, and when she's able, we'll make sure she's involved in every decision. But right now, she needs you to move forward with the work you started together. As the meeting wound down, Lilly felt something she hadn't experienced since Eleanor's stroke. Hope. Not just hope that the project might succeed, but hope that she might actually be capable of leading something this significant. David walked her to her car afterward. How do you feel?
terrified, but also excited. I still don't understand why all these people want to help. Because you created something worth helping, he said simply. You gave those women a voice, and now that voice is inspiring others to act. That evening, Lilly sat beside Eleanor's hospital bed and talked her through everything that had happened. Eleanor couldn't respond coherently, but her eyes seemed more alert, and she squeezed Lily's hand at appropriate moments. We're going to do this, Eleanor. We're going to make sure everyone knows what you and the other WASPs accomplished. And when you're better, you'll see your dream become reality. Her phone buzzed with a text from Betty Sullivan. The girls and I have been talking. We want to do more interviews. Can you come back to Tucson next month? Another message. This one from Dorothy Kim. Found some photos I forgot to show you. Also have contact information for 3 more WASPs who couldn't make the reunion. Then one from Professor Roberts. Just spoke with a colleague at the Smithsonian. They're interested in hearing about our project. Lilly stared at the messages, realizing that what had started as Eleanor's dream of preserving forgotten history had somehow transformed into a movement. These women's stories weren't just being preserved, they were inspiring a new generation of people to recognize and celebrate unsung heroes. For the first time since Eleanor's stroke, Lilly allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly the right person to carry this torch forward. Not because she was the most qualified or experienced, but because she understood something that couldn't be taught in any classroom. These stories mattered, and the women who lived them deserved to be remembered, not as footnotes in history, but as the heroes that they had always been. The scared young woman who had left her brother's barbecue in tears just a few months before felt like a different person entirely. That woman was looking for permission to matter. This woman was ready to make herself matter.
4 months later, on a crisp October morning, Lilly stood in the main gallery of the Phoenix Art Museum, surrounded by controlled chaos. The exhibition opening was scheduled for the following evening, and every surface of the 3,000-square-foot space was covered with photographs, artifacts, and interactive displays that told the story of the women Air Force Service pilots. "Lilly, where do you want the flight simulator?" called out Jake Morrison, the museum's installation coordinator. She consulted her tablet, which had become permanently attached to her hand over the past weeks. Section C, next to Dorothy Kim's interview station. Make sure visitors can see the video screen from the simulator seat. The past 4 months had been the most intense, challenging, and rewarding period of Lilly's life. The team David had assembled had become more than collaborators. They'd become a family united by their shared passion for the project. Tom Sullivan had secured not just 1, but 3 major grants, totaling $150,000. Professor Roberts had uncovered archival footage that no one knew existed. Maria Lopez had crafted a 45-minute documentary that had already been accepted into 2 film festivals. But perhaps most importantly, Lilly had conducted over 30 additional interviews with WASPs and their families across 4 states. Each conversation had revealed new layers to the story, new examples of courage and determination that had been lost to history. "The lighting on panel 7 looks off," observed Lilly Martinez, the graphic designer who would become Lilly's right hand in creating the visual narrative of the exhibition. "I see it too," Lilly replied, making a note. "Can we get the museum tech team to adjust it this afternoon?" As she moved through the gallery, checking every detail, Lilly marveled at how natural this all felt now. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined herself directing a team of professionals, managing a 6-figure budget, or speaking confidently with museum directors and grant committees. Yet, here she was, wearing a crisp blazer she'd bought specifically for meetings, and carrying herself with an authority that had developed gradually through months of proving herself capable of rising to meet each new challenge. Her phone buzzed with a text from Betty Sullivan. "Just arrived at the hotel. Can't wait to see what you've created, dear." Lilly smiled, feeling a familiar flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. 12 surviving WASPs were flying in for tomorrow's opening, along with family members of those who had passed away. The weight of their expectations had kept her awake many nights, but it had also driven her to create something worthy of their legacy. "Lilly," Jennifer Walsh from the Arizona Historical Society approached with a clipboard.
The Smithsonian curator just confirmed she'll be here tomorrow. She's specifically interested in discussing a potential touring version of the exhibition. The Smithsonian, Lilly repeated, still sometimes amazed at how far the project had grown. A year ago, I was designing logos for pizza shops. And now you are preserving American history, Jennifer pointed out. Funny how life works. As the afternoon wore on, Lilly found herself standing in front of the exhibition's centerpiece, a recreation of Eleanor's living room from that first night when she'd shared her wartime photographs. The museum's set designers have recreated every detail: the floral sofa, the family photos, even Eleanor's knitting basket. At the center sat Eleanor's original photo albums, displayed in climate-controlled cases. Eleanor had been moved to a rehabilitation facility 2 months earlier, and while her speech was still limited, her cognitive function had improved significantly. She'd been able to review and approve every aspect of the exhibition, though she wouldn't be able to attend the opening. Lilly planned to visit her the next day to share photos and videos from the event. "It looks perfect," said a familiar voice behind her. Lilly turned to see Marcus standing at the entrance to the gallery, looking uncomfortable but genuinely impressed. She hadn't spoken to him in months, not since their heated phone conversation at the hospital. "Marcus? What are you doing here?" "Maya called Jessica and told her about the opening. We thought we should see what you've been working on." Lilly felt her shoulders tense automatically. "Is Jessica with you?" "She's in the parking lot. She wasn't sure she'd be welcome." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by the evidence of everything Lilly had accomplished. Marcus wandered slowly through the exhibition, reading the text panels, watching video interviews, examining artifacts. "This is incredible, Lilly," he finally said, stopping in front of a display featuring Alice Thompson's flight logs. "I had no idea these women even existed, let alone what they did." "Most people don't," she replied carefully. "That's why the project mattered so much to Eleanor." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Lilly, I owe you an apology. When you were at the hospital, when I said those things about Eleanor, I was completely wrong." "Yes, you were."
He winced but nodded. "Jessica feels terrible too. She's been watching the media coverage of this exhibition, reading about the grants you received, seeing your interviews in the newspaper. She realizes she misjudged you." "She didn't misjudge me, Marcus. She dismissed me. There's a difference." "You're right." He was quiet for a long moment, studying a photograph of Eleanor working on an aircraft engine in 1943. "I keep thinking about what you said on the phone, that Eleanor was one of the most remarkable people you'd ever met. Looking at all this, I understand now why you felt that way." Lilly watched her brother absorb the full scope of what she'd created, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sadness. She'd wanted his approval for so long, but now that it was being offered, it felt somehow beside the point. "The thing is, Marcus," she said quietly, "I don't need you to understand Eleanor's value to know that my friendship with her mattered. I don't need Jessica's approval to know that this work is important. I used to think I needed family validation to feel worthy, but I was wrong." "So does that mean you don't want us here tomorrow?" Lilly considered the question. "I want you here if you're genuinely interested in honoring these women's stories. But if you're just coming because you've realized I might actually be successful at something, then no." Marcus nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Can I bring Jessica in? I think she needs to see this." 20 minutes later, Lilly found herself giving an impromptu tour to her brother and sister-in-law, explaining the historical significance of the WASP program and the challenges of preserving oral history. Jessica listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and genuinely engaging with the material. "Lilly," Jessica said when the tour ended, "I owe you a huge apology for what I said at the barbecue. I was completely out of line." "Yes, you were." Jessica flinched but pressed on. I think I was threatened by how different you are from me. I've always measured success by conventional standards, the house, the car, the stable job, and seeing you choose a different path made me question my own choices." "So you decided to tear me down instead of examining your own insecurities?" Yes, and that was wrong and cruel. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. Watching you create all this, seeing the respect these elderly women have for you, reading about the grants and the documentary, I realize I don't know anything about real accomplishment. Lilly studied her sister-in-law's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Jessica, I don't need you to diminish your accomplishments to validate mine. You and Marcus have built a good life together. That matters too. The problem was never that we're different. It's that you couldn't accept that different doesn't mean wrong. You're right, and I'm sorry it took seeing your name in the newspaper for me to realize how wrong I was. That evening, as the museum staff finished the final preparations for the opening, Lilly sat in the empty gallery surrounded by the stories of women who had refused to accept limitations. Tomorrow, hundreds of people would walk through these spaces and learn about courage they never knew existed. The documentary would air on PBS next month, reaching thousands more, and the touring version of the exhibition would carry these stories to museums across the country. But more than any of that, Lilly knew she had kept her promise to Eleanor. She had ensured that these remarkable women would not be forgotten, that their service would be recognized, and that their courage would inspire future generations. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Saw Marcus and Jessica leaving. How did that go? Better than expected, but it doesn't change anything. Tomorrow isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving these women right. As she turned off the gallery lights and headed home to prepare for the biggest day of her professional life, Lilly reflected on how far she had come since that terrible night at the barbecue. The scared young woman who had fled in tears had been replaced by someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of achieving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, media interviews, speeches, the pressure of a public opening, but for the first time in her life, Lilly wasn't afraid of being seen, judged, or found wanting. She had work that mattered, a team that respected her, and the knowledge that she had honored the trust of some of the bravest women in American history. She was ready. The opening night of Wings of Courage, the Women Air Force Service pilots, exceeded every expectation Lilly had dared to have. By 6 p.m., the Phoenix Art Museum's main gallery was packed with over 400 attendees. Veterans, historians, students, families, and community members who had come to honor the forgotten heroes of World War II. Local news crews moved through the crowd, conducting interviews, while photographers documented the surviving WASPs as they saw their stories displayed with the dignity and prominence they had always deserved. Lilly stood near the entrance, wearing a navy blue dress that Eleanor had helped her pick out during one of her lucid moments at the rehabilitation center. She watched the crowd with a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and profound gratitude. Betty Sullivan was holding court near the interactive flight simulator, regaling a group of young girls with stories about flying experimental aircraft. Dorothy Kim was showing a reporter her original flight jacket, explaining the significance of each patch and pin. Lilly Martinez? A woman approached with a professional camera and a warm smile. I'm Rebecca Chen from the Arizona Republic. Could I get a few minutes for an interview? 6 months ago, the prospect of being interviewed by a major newspaper would have sent Lilly into a panic. Now, she simply nodded and led Rebecca to a quieter corner of the gallery. This exhibition has been getting national attention. The documentary has been picked up by PBS, and I understand there's interest from the Smithsonian. How does it feel to go from working part-time at a coffee shop to curating what many are calling the most important World War II exhibition in the Southwest? Lilly smiled, thinking of Eleanor's words about courage being action despite fear. Honestly, a year ago, I thought success meant having other people's approval. I measured myself against my sister-in-law's perfect house, my brother's stable career, my family's expectations. But working with Eleanor and these incredible women taught me that real success means using your gifts to serve something larger than yourself. Tell me about Eleanor Patterson. She's credited as co-creator, but I understand she's been unable to participate due to her stroke. Eleanor is the heart of this project. She served as a WASP mechanic when women weren't supposed to be capable of complex technical work. After the war, she spent decades being told to forget about her service, to pretend it never happened.
But she never forgot, and she never stopped believing these stories needed to be told. Rebecca scribbled notes quickly. What's next for you professionally? Are you planning to continue working in museum curation? Actually, I've been offered a position as Director of Community History Programs at the Arizona Historical Society. I'll be developing exhibitions that highlight underrepresented voices in Arizona history. And the WASP documentary will be the first in a series I'm producing about women who changed history in ways we're only beginning to understand. As the interview concluded, Lilly spotted Marcus and Jessica across the gallery, deep in conversation with Professor Roberts about the historical research process. The site would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, but now it felt natural. They were part of her world now, not because she needed their approval, but because they had chosen to expand their understanding of what mattered. Lilly, Betty Sullivan's voice carried across the gallery. Come here, dear. There's someone I want you to meet. Lilly made her way through the crowd to find Betty standing with a distinguished woman in her 50s wearing a military dress uniform. This is Colonel Patricia Williams from the Air Force Academy, Betty Sullivan said proudly. She's here representing the military's official recognition of WASP service. Colonel Williams extended her hand with a firm grip. Ms. Martinez, what you've accomplished here is extraordinary. The Air Force Academy would like to invite you to speak at our Women's Leadership Symposium next spring. Your work preserving these stories aligns perfectly with our mission to inspire the next generation of female aviators. As they discussed the speaking engagement, Lilly caught sight of a familiar figure entering the gallery. Her heart skipped as she saw Eleanor moving slowly with a walker, accompanied by 2 nurses from her rehabilitation facility. Eleanor! Lilly excused herself and rushed to her mentor's side. Eleanor's speech was still halting, but her smile was radiant. Couldn't miss this, she managed to say. So proud of you. With the nurse's help, Lilly guided Eleanor through the exhibition, watching her face light up as she saw her photographs professionally displayed, her stories given the prominence they deserved, and her service finally acknowledged by her community. When they reached the recreation of Eleanor's living room, the older woman gripped Lily's hand tightly. We did it, Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. No, Lilly corrected gently. You did it. You had the courage to preserve these stories, to trust me with them, to believe they mattered when everyone else had forgotten. Eleanor shook her head slowly. You transformed them, made them alive again.
At 8 p.m., Lilly took the small stage that had been set up near the main display. The crowd quieted as she approached the microphone, and for just a moment, she thought about the terrified young woman who had fled her brother's barbecue in tears. Good evening, and thank you all for being here to honor the women Air Force service pilots, she began, her voice clear and confident. When Eleanor Patterson first showed me her wartime photographs, I had no idea I was looking at some of the most important untold stories in American history. She gestured toward Eleanor, who was seated in the front row. Eleanor and the women she served with didn't fly military aircraft for recognition or glory. They did it because their country needed them, and they had skills that could save lives. When the war ended, they were told to go home and forget they had ever been pilots. For decades, their service wasn't officially recognized. Their stories weren't taught in schools. Their contributions were erased from history. The gallery was completely silent now, all attention focused on Lily's words. But they never forgot who they were or what they had accomplished. And tonight, we ensure that their courage, their skill, and their sacrifice will never be forgotten again. The applause was thunderous, lasting several minutes. As it finally died down, Lilly continued. This exhibition exists because Eleanor refused to let these stories die with her generation. It exists because 12 incredible women trusted me with their memories.
It exists because a team of dedicated professionals believed that preserving history matters more than personal recognition. She paused, looking out at the crowd, at the surviving wasps, at the families of those who had passed, at the young girls who were learning about courage they never knew existed. But most importantly, this exhibition exists because we as a community decided that forgotten heroes deserve to be remembered, that underrepresented voices deserve to be heard, and that history belongs to all of us, not just those who were traditionally allowed to write it. As the formal program concluded and guests began to mingle again, Lilly found herself standing with her team: David, Professor Roberts, Jennifer, Tom, Sarah, and Maria. These people had become more than collaborators. They were the family she had chosen and who had chosen her in return. "So," David said with a grin, "ready for the next project?" "What did you have in mind?" Lilly asked, though she suspected she already knew. Jennifer found documentation about a group of Mexican-American women who worked in defense plants during World War II, Professor Roberts said excitedly. "Their stories have never been properly documented. And I have contacts at 3 more museums interested in hosting exhibitions about underrepresented military service," added Tom. Lilly laughed, feeling that familiar flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. "Are you sure I'm ready to take on something else this big?" "The question," said Eleanor, who was seated in the front row, "isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you're willing." Looking around at the gallery full of people learning about courage they never knew existed, at the surviving wasps sharing their stories with younger generations, at the evidence of what could be accomplished when someone decided to honor forgotten heroes, Lilly knew her answer. "I'm willing." 6 months later, Lilly stood in her new office at the Arizona Historical Society, surrounded by research materials for 3 different exhibition projects. Her desk held letters from museums in 12 states requesting touring versions of Wings of Courage, and her computer screen showed the outline for a book proposal about overlooked women in military history. On her wall hung a framed photograph from the exhibition opening, Eleanor surrounded by the surviving wasps, all of them smiling with the satisfaction of stories finally told. Beside it was a letter from a 10-year-old girl who had visited the exhibition and written to say she wanted to become a pilot when she grew up. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Saw your interview on the morning show. You looked so confident and professional. Hard to believe you used to hide behind the espresso machine when customers tried to make small talk." Lilly smiled, remembering the anxious young woman she had been just a year ago. That version of herself felt like a distant relative, someone she remembered fondly but no longer recognized as herself. Another text, this one from Marcus. "Jessica and I watched the PBS documentary last night. We're so proud of who you've become." But the message that meant the most came from Eleanor. "New project sounds wonderful. Can't wait to help however I can. So proud to have been part of your journey." As Lilly prepared for her afternoon meeting with potential donors for the next exhibition, she reflected on the transformation that had brought her to this moment. She had started this journey thinking she needed other people's permission to matter, other people's validation to have worth. Instead, she had discovered something far more powerful: the knowledge that she had gifts worth sharing and the courage to use them in service of something larger than herself. The scared young woman who had been told she made everyone uncomfortable had become someone who made people think, who preserved important stories, who inspired others to recognize courage in unexpected places. And this, Lilly realized, as she straightened her blazer and headed to her meeting, was only the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.